Hello to the Double GDP community. This is Jay for the sprint that is ending here February 19th. And I just wanted to give an update on partnerships and Double GDP. Lots to share this particular update. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about blog posts and the role that they're playing in helping us kind of refine our point of view and build the right types of partnerships in advance and in connection to the Charter Cities Conference that's coming up in March. We're going to talk about some new, really interesting open source projects that we've been learning about and are building connections to right now that connect with a lot of the different types of the efforts that we are trying to drive. And there may be some opportunities either to draft off of, include in some of our software, or at a minimum build some partnerships around. And so that's on the open source side. And then finally, I'll talk about a couple more targeted partnerships that we are beginning to kind of like invest more in over the next couple of sprints. But I wanted to first start by talking a little bit about the most recent blog posts that we've just put out. So let me just share my screen here. You know what? Let's see. Stop share. I want to make sure I got the right one on. There we go. So a new blog post up this week, which is really exciting. We wrote a post on, it's entitled, "When you look at future cities, what do you see?" As I've been leading our partnerships work, I've been talking with a lot of different folks on new types of cities. What we had started to see was really like two very different approaches to building new communities that a number of our partners and potential future partners were taking. And one was getting a lot of press, and that was really around the smart city. We really saw that kind of like highlighted most recently in the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, which happened last month. Tons and tons of attention to various different smart city efforts and smart city technologies that were kind of coming on board at that conference. And so that was kind of like one camp of visionary leaders and technologists thinking about new types of cities that were going to come along. And then the other one really kind of like lives in the camp of the Charter Cities Institute and this conference that we are going to be attending and speaking at later in March. And that's the idea of a charter city. And so what we wanted to do was sort of like write a post about what are these two different visions for the future of community building: the smart city, right, and the charter city. How are we beginning to kind of understand those two different visions for the future? How do we understand the different like needs and intentions that the community builders who are investing in those different types of communities are really kind of getting after when it comes down to things like mobility, connectivity, data, startups on entrepreneurship and technology investment, and then really what's our role, right, as a technology partner to these new types of cities? How might that look different when we're partnering with someone who's really investing in a new city that's oriented around this idea of smart versus one that's really investing in this idea of a charter community or a charter city. So it's a great blog post. I'm proud to say that it's getting some nice traction on our website. And I was just looking at Google Analytics, and like really, in addition to our jobs page, which by far is the biggest attractor to see us at Double GDP. The two blog posts that we've written most recently, both this one and the one that we published in the last sprint, have gotten some nice traction. So really excited about that, and continuing to use our blog as a way to tell the story of what we're learning, the ways in which we are connecting with the broader community, tell some of the stories about interesting partners that we meet, and also talk a little bit about our vision for technology and what role it can play in the future of community building. the blog is a really good tool for us to talk, especially in the run up to the Charter Cities Conference, which is in late March. We're using it sort of as a tool to help us kind of like refine some of our thinking for the ways that we will reach out to folks at that conference, build connections, and hopefully use those connections to kind of like translate partnerships into new customers for our platform going forward. You may remember that we brought on in the last sprint a writer to help us kind of do that, and Matt's just been great helping us refine our thinking and get more velocity out of that. So really proud of that. For the next sprint, what we're thinking about is a blog post around modern marketing and its role in the future of community building. Really valuable way for us to kind of like to talk between our product team and our partnerships team here at DGDP, because some of the earliest pieces of our platform that we have been investing in have a lot to do with the platforms that have been built in modern technology companies around customer relationship management. And yet every time we talk to visionary new community builders, we hear both needs around and them communicating visions for how modern marketing might help them attract new residents, attract new businesses, hold on to those relationships, and continue to kind of like speed up the development of their communities. And so I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of like the things we can learn from very successful platforms like WordPress, marketing automation platforms, analytics platforms on the web, communication and feedback platforms, and what have you, to help those visionary founders do what they're trying to do. So that's our idea for what might be the next blog post out in this next sprint. So if that was about the blog and its role in partnership building, the next one is talking a little bit about some open source projects. So we've been chatting with folks and been introduced to two really interesting open source projects that are related to our broader efforts in building a end-to-end platform for building new cities. The first one is one that's called ULEX, and ULEX is an open source legal system that's been developed over the last few years, and then we came to be introduced to by a former partner of Mark Lutters from the Charter Cities Institute, and as we can understand it, Mark actually worked on this at one point in time in his career too. So that's something that we're going to be digging into a little bit more over the course of the next few weeks. Both that partner as well as the open source project that they had here on how do you build a better legal or conflict resolution system that can work in many different types of countries, and how might some of that be enabled by software? So that's a really interesting open source project. The other one that we've heard of and learned about recently has to do with an organization called OSET, or the OSET Institute, which stands for Open Source Election Technologies. And they've published a public license for an open source a digital approach to elections. And what I love now that I've learned about OSET, the OSET Institute, is their perspective on voting as a critical infrastructure of technology of communities, and I just really love the way that they called that, right? The way that we vote, it is part of the infrastructure of community building, and of course in different types of communities, whether you're talking about like a city or a state, or maybe we're actually just talking about kind of like a much smaller community like a neighborhood or homeowners association, voting looks different, right? It's not always about electing a president. And yet the way we vote is a critical infrastructure for the way that we build our community. And it's I think the same principle behind why we've thought really early on about a lot of various different feedback mechanisms, because the way that we communicate with with the people who are administrating or growing our communities also helps us feel like we are part of building that community. And so thinking about what we can learn from and or borrow from or bring in from these open source projects, both around conflict resolution and law, as well as around voting. A really interesting thing for us to think about from a product development standpoint, and certainly from a partnership standpoint. So we're really excited to continue conversations with the Institute for Competitive Governance around legal systems, as well as to meet some of the folks from the OSET Institute who are investing in the future of democracy through voting. And then thirdly, I'll talk just about a couple more near-term partnerships that we're trying to invest in and pay attention to. One of the communities that I've gotten to know over the years is the Stanford Seed community. And Stanford Seed has been investing in and supporting entrepreneurship across West Africa for the last few years, and they've had a lot of success. Nigeria, Ghana, really good success stories for the Stanford community there. So we're going to be seeing what we can do over the next couple of sprints to build out some relationships with Stanford Seed, and whether or not through that actual organization, maybe some of the entrepreneurs who have come through that and are really most interested in real estate development and property development. I just think it's the right type of community for the type of vision we have for investing in our customers, and we're looking forward to seeing where that can take us as we move forward. So that's it for the partnerships update for this last sprint. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.